Welcome to another Town Hall Thursday. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, Libertarian for Governor of New Hampshire. I'm joined this week by Nicholas Sarwark, the Libertarian candidate for Hillsborough County County Attorney. I decided to vote for your lovely wife for sheriff because I went ahead, I got my absentee ballot in the mail a couple days ago, filled that out yesterday morning and dropped it off at City Hall on my way to college. Interestingly, I dropped off my wife's ballot as well, had to fill out a form that I was dropping her ballot off because New Hampshire has some weird laws on who's allowed to drop off ballots. Nick, thanks for joining again.
Thank you for having me on, Darryl.
So a few weeks ago, you actually had a hearing in front of the Ballot Law Commission where someone had challenged your candidacy. Do you want to talk about that hearing a little bit?
A little bit. So there was, after we received certification from the Secretary of State that I had qualified for the ballot, collected enough signatures to run for Hillsborough County Attorney as a Libertarian, filled out all of the appropriate forms and affidavits and financial disclosures. I got the notice from the Secretary of State, and about a week later, I got contacted by the Secretary of State's office indicating that someone had challenged my qualifications and sought to reverse Secretary Gardner's decision to put me on the ballot. So I went up to Concord to answer the challenge. The first sign that things were going pretty well is when they called the case, they asked for the person who had sent the letter appealing the Secretary's decision if they were present, and they didn't show up. So it always makes it harder to win a case in court or in any administrative proceeding if you're not there.
Yes.
And, you know, I answered all the questions for the ballot law commissioners. And after explaining the situation and all of the things I had done and all the things that were in process, they decided unanimously to reject the appeal and uphold the Secretary's decision. And that was that. So I am on the ballot in November. We're looking at, oh my gosh, how close is it now?
We are 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, so it's we're definitely ramping up now. You know, I'm running on this whole platform of trying to keep Hillsborough County the safe and prosperous place that our family chose to move to. You know, a place where crime is low, people get along, and the idea that the justice system in this county should be the crown jewel of New Hampshire. Hillsborough County is the largest county in the Granite State. And what has happened over the term of the last county attorney, there have been a lot of problems with the office. There have been communication problems, there have been personnel problems. At one point, the Attorney General was seeking to make the county attorney resign. That got vetoed by the Executive Council. And then the Attorney General's office supervised the county attorney for a significant portion of his current term. And I don't think that that is appropriate for the largest county in New Hampshire, for the most populous county, to have somebody who has no prior experience in criminal law on either side and is essentially getting trained on the job by the Attorney General's office. And for a taxpayer in Hillsborough County, that means that you're paying for your county attorney twice, because you're paying both his salary, but you're also paying for the Attorney General who is assisting him in doing the job that he was elected to do. And that was a big part of me stepping up. What I've found since stepping up to run for office is that things are not as nice in Hillsborough County as I had been led to believe. There are currently over 900 criminal cases, serious criminal cases, that have not even made it to the indictment stage. They have not been presented to a grand jury. And that kind of backlog is roughly a third of the total cases that the office handles in any given year, a little under a third. If elected, my primary task is both to clear out that backlog, working with law enforcement, the courts, and the defense bar, but also to identify the systemic issues within the office that led to that backlog and find out why it is that our system is not able to get justice quickly for the victims of crime and for the people who are accused of crime.
Now, I realize that this is something that you may not know, so feel free to say, I don't know. Of those cases that are currently backlogged, how many of those are drug offenses?
I am not privy to that information yet.
Okay.
Because it's at the charging process. So I guess through public records, I could find arrest records. But since they haven't been presented to a grand jury, there's very limited public information available because it hasn't formally been indicted and brought into the serious misdemeanor felony system. And just to be clear, none of these 900 cases are very minor offenses, because minor offenses in New Hampshire are not prosecuted by the county attorney's office. They're prosecuted by city or town prosecutors that handle driving infractions or misdemeanor assaults, little things, which are still criminal and violations of the law.
Anything that's a Class A misdemeanor or a felony is what
Correct.
winds up going through that grand jury process and is handled in the superior court. Everything else is handled through the district or circuit court, although there is some kind of weird loophole in the law. Loophole is not the right word, but certain offenses, the defendant can choose a bench trial and then wind up going de novo before a jury. I know a couple of people that have done that, and it's an interesting tactic, and it definitely lets you know what the prosecution plans to do and how they plan to present the case.
Right. It's very similar if you do any trial work, and I've done a significant amount. I have over 35 trials to a jury under my belt, everything from lower level misdemeanors up through first degree murders. And anytime that there's a hung jury or some kind of misconduct during the trial that creates a mistrial, both sides get to see what the first trial looked like, and they get to adjust their tactics to move forward in a different way the second time around. So retrials tend to be shorter because people cut out things that didn't seem to resonate with the jury. And there aren't really as many surprises because the surprises have already come up. And in the New Hampshire system, those lower level offenses that are in the lower court, you're eligible for a de novo trial if the trial does not go your way as a defendant. So that sometimes can lead to a county attorney's office handling one of those lower level cases because they would handle the appeal up to the superior court. But as a general matter, if it's going to the county attorney's office, and roughly 3,500 cases a year go through the county attorney's office, it is a serious case. And I want to just highlight that for 1 second, because we do have a serious systemic problem in Hillsborough County, where the office needs to be run better and there needs to be better communication with law enforcement. But overall, Hillsborough County, like New Hampshire generally, is a relatively low crime place. We have about 420,000 people that live in the county, and we have less than 4,000 serious criminal cases that get through the system every year. That's a vanishingly low number in comparison to the rest of the country. But that number depends on us continuing to maintain standards of a justice system where the victims feel like their cases are being prosecuted rapidly, where defendants have an opportunity early on to find out what they're charged with and to mount a defense and seek a trial if they want a trial before a jury, where plea dispositions are handled efficiently and effectively, and where everyone in the criminal justice system is working to make sure that criminal justice is handled appropriately, that we are not wasting taxpayer resources on cases that are either marginal, as far as they'd be very difficult to prove in court, or don't fit in with the priorities of the communities that we serve. If most people, for example, here in Manchester, the biggest priority when I talk to voters here is they want to deal with the opioid epidemic that we have relative to the rest of the state. and homelessness and the recidivism of those quality of life offenses, property crimes, drug crimes, car break-ins, burglaries, things that make people feel unsafe in their community. They want to deal with that. And that's going to be my priority as your county attorney, is to focus on the priorities of the community that elects me and make sure that they feel like they are getting their money's worth from their tax dollars.
Now, you mentioned misconduct a little earlier, not necessarily in the way that I'm about to ask the question here, but as you know, police misconduct and prosecutorial misconduct is a problem nationwide. It doesn't seem to be as big of a problem in New Hampshire, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen. Would County Attorney Sarwark, or rather, how would County Attorney Sarwark handle prosecutorial misconduct of others within the county attorney's office?
So when I first became a member of the bar, I was originally sworn in 2008. One of the oaths you take is to follow the rules of ethics and be an officer of the court. And that requires you to have candor to the tribunal. You're not allowed to hide things from the defense. You're not allowed to cheat, right? Trials are definitely contests, and the defense and the prosecution zealously advocate for their side, but there's rules about how things should be done. In a county attorney's office that I'm the head of, it is not acceptable to engage in prosecutorial misconduct or violations of the rules of ethics. There's a saying in life, and it applies to this as much as anything else: we get what we tolerate. And so the key to creating a culture that has minimal to no misconduct or bad behavior is that at the point of bad behavior, there is an immediate, proportionate response that addresses the behavior and works to prevent the behavior from occurring again. And that varies depending on the type of misconduct, what the appropriate way to deal with it is. And in my years of running a small business and having employees, you get pretty good at figuring out how to deal with personnel issues like that. When it comes to misconduct of law enforcement or other governmental actors, my understanding of prosecution is that prosecutors are not just called to seek convictions, they're called to seek justice. They're called to provide equal justice under the law to everyone. And I take that very seriously. So if you commit a crime in Hillsborough County, you should be prosecuted for that crime, regardless of what your role in the community is, regardless of what job you have, regardless of what sort of uniform you wear. A crime should apply equally to everyone under the law. That's the idea of the rule of law, is that there are not people who are above it or below it. Everyone is on an equal footing before the law. And that's going to be the culture that I would seek to foster in the county attorney's office, and make sure that I clearly communicate to all of the law enforcement agencies, the 29 towns and 2 cities in Hillsborough County, what kind of policy and tone the county attorney's office will have under my direction, and that we have clear lines of communication so that if there are issues, we can address them right away rather than pushing them down the road or, deferring away to some other agency. One of the things that's frustrating about, in talking to some of the towns and cities and local government officials, a lot of people in the towns and cities don't talk to the county attorney's office. They assume that that's just for the chief of police to talk to. But I think prosecution priorities and issues with prosecution go outside of the law enforcement community itself, because it affects all of us if cases are not getting handled effectively, if dispositions are inappropriate, if taxpayer resources are being wasted on cases that are marginal or low priority.
And one other thing that I definitely want to touch on with you, because it's a big part of my gubernatorial campaign, is wanting to get rid of the trial tax. And I know that you are definitely familiar with what the trial tax is. Somebody that's watching may not have ever heard the term. The trial tax is when you wind up with a much stiffer penalty post-trial than what you're offered by the prosecutor pre-trial in a plea bargain, where Nick will drop this felony down to a Class B misdemeanor that's no jail time, will suspend half of your fine, and give you some probation if you just plead guilty. But if you take this to trial, we're going to punish you, and we're going to ask for the mandatory minimum sentence. And the judge is most likely going to grant it because I'm the prosecution, you're the defendant, and, well, you're already wearing that orange jumpsuit, so you just look guilty. So what are you going to do? So would County Attorney Sarwark then urge the judge to not give that stiffer sentence post-trial if somebody snubs their nose at the pretrial plea deal?
So there's a lot to unpack, and I'll try and break it down. The nature of plea bargaining, the concept of plea bargaining, is that there's a prosecution side that thinks a case is of this severity, or it meets these elements, or it deserves this kind of sanction. And then there's a defense side that thinks, oh no, this deserves a lot less. A plea bargain is essentially a negotiation between the two sides to find a conviction or a set of charges and a sentence that is appropriate for the case, that everyone can agree to move forward. You know, the person who is accused of the crime can move on with paying whatever debt to society they have and fulfilling their sentence, and the prosecution office can go on to prosecuting the next case. In order to make plea bargaining work, you have to have an incentive to accept a plea disposition versus going to a jury trial. That's always been a little dicey in American law, because what you're doing is you're saying, here is a constitutional right you have, and then you're encouraging people to give up the constitutional right in exchange for a benefit. In this case, less prison, less jail, less probation, less community service, lower level offenses, not being a felon, whatever it is. So I don't think that it would be possible or practical at this stage to somehow try and get rid of the entire plea bargaining process, right? That just, I can't imagine how that would work.
Well,
but
that wasn't my question. My question wasn't.
I know. I'm
get rid of the plea bargaining process.
I'm moving to your question.
Okay.
Right. So that's the plea bargaining process. So a prosecutor should never offer in a plea bargain a disposition that they are not comfortable with the defendant taking, right? If it's a deal that you're going to offer, your judgment as a prosecutor is that that is an appropriate sanction for what that person did. If that person goes to trial, there is a piece of the equation that's being taken out, which is they are not admitting guilt, taking responsibility. Instead, they're saying, prove it, because you have to under the Constitution. If you're convicted at trial of more than you would have been offered to plead to, you are going to face a wider range of sentence. And that is the nature of going to trial. That's the gamble of the thing. But our prosecutors, under my leadership, I believe that at the end of a trial, if there are convictions on the charges, that the sentencing argument should be made based on all of the factors involved in the case. There shouldn't be a trial tax where you are getting a higher sentence because you've made the prosecutor upset or you've made the judge upset for wasting everyone's time, and this is how we punish you and set an example for other people. However, if you're convicted of a felony but you were charged with a misdemeanor, then the prosecutor at sentencing is going to argue to the judge for a felony sentence. They're not going to argue for a misdemeanor sentence. So there's some amount of greater penalty if you roll the dice and don't win, but there shouldn't be anything that has the appearance of, or even gets close to, you're being punished for exercising a constitutional right.
But can you acknowledge that the way it plays out currently appears that people are being punished for exercising their constitutional right to go to trial?
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of the reason that this happens is our system, very frankly, is not set up to try everybody. Our original system of justice had jury trial enshrined in the Constitution because there were very few penalties or very few crimes that were of a severity that they would get a jury trial. And so it was possible. If you had very little crime, then criminals can all go to trial. What has happened in the United States, even in New Hampshire, which has less criminal laws than other states do, is there are so many criminal laws and so many variations of the criminal laws that there are now more people arrested, investigated, and prosecuted than could possibly ever go to trial. And so that system would break under its own weight without plea bargaining, but people would reject pleas if there wasn't anything in it for them. So if you were to say, here's a plea offer, but if you make me spend a week in trial to convict you, you can still have the same sanction, then nobody, unless they didn't have the time to go to court, would ever take the plea disposition.
Well, and then you also, when we're talking about high-level misdemeanor and felony cases, most people have an attorney that they're going to have to pay. So there is that, expense that they have to take into consideration. But even at traffic court, the vast majority of people just plead guilty because they want to make it go away, and they don't want to, spend half a day sitting in court. And, there's always the gamble that kind of like with your ballot law commission hearing, that the prosecution against you doesn't show up, which is what happened the last time I went to court, where the police officer that wrote the ticket didn't show up, case dismissed. Right.
Yeah, and that's always a possibility, and that's something that defense lawyers often take advantage of. And that's why, these kind of questions, I understand all the issues that you're raising.
Yep.
It's just that the justice system is a very complicated machine with lots of moving parts.
Oh, yes,
and I have seen idealistic people try to change one aspect at a time, and it doesn't tend to go well because it's a more complex system than that. Right. So what I can tell you and what I can tell all of your viewers is, as an experienced criminal law attorney, as somebody who has dealt with cases from the very minor to the most serious cases we have in our legal system, there are differences between the cases. There are a lot of issues that are surround the justice system and how it's applied in this country. I have more familiarity and have seen more aspects of that system than the opponents that I have in the race. So I can bring that experience and wisdom to how can we make the system better. My goal as county attorney is not in 4 years, as one of my opponents has said, yeah, you elected me for a 2-year term, but I just need 2 more years to get it right. Not in 4 years, but in 2 years, to systemically make prosecution in the county attorney's office in Hillsborough County more efficient, more effective, have a standard of legal practice that is the jewel of the Granite State, and make sure that people here in Manchester or Nashua or even in Milford or Amherst or Deering know that if somebody breaks into their house or breaks into their car and the police arrest that person, that will move swiftly towards some sort of resolution, that justice will not be delayed, because as we all know, justice delayed is justice denied. Witnesses lose their memory, people move away, people have to stay on pretrial supervision for years at a time, waiting, paying for monitoring or ankle monitors or things like that. It doesn't do anyone in the system any good to have the kind of backlog we have, or to have the system be overloaded, because then it is at the breaking point, at the point that you do, heaven forbid, have a very serious case, right? Or some sort of, something comes up that just pushes it. And I think that's what we're seeing with COVID-19, is that it's not that COVID-19 itself has changed that much about criminal justice. It's that it is another pressure on an already overloaded system that shows you that it was a little bit rickety before. And it's very similar with bail reform, which is another strong concern in the law enforcement community. There are some issues with how bail reform has been implemented, but as I told the chiefs of police, that's handled in Congress. They're the ones who pass the laws, and it's our job, those of us that are working to either enforce the laws or prosecute crime, to adapt to that system and then provide that feedback to our legislators for the next session about this is what's working, this is what's not. But we do have to adapt. The response cannot be to say it should just be like it was before, because I don't think that that's a viable alternative in the legislature. And even if it was, it's not the way it is now. And as executive agencies or administrative agencies, we are called to implement the system as it is, not to legislate from our position and decide, oh, I'm just not going to prosecute that kind of crime, right? Or oh, I'm just going to, even though there's bail reform, I'm going to try and keep everybody locked up. Like, you can't do that. That's more of a closing your eyes and covering your ears and wishing that we could go back to the time before. We have to adapt and overcome. And that's why I think it's so important for Hillsborough County voters to elect a county attorney who has the energy, the vitality, the experience, the professionalism, the broad experience, both in the private sector and in public service, and understands all of these issues and can work to build those bridges with the various stakeholders in the criminal justice community, rather than isolate or choose one side or another.
And Nick, I know that time's short. You need to jump off here in a couple minutes. Couple last quick questions. Other than money and possibly volunteers to help you in these final weeks, what do you actually need to do to win? Like, how many votes are you looking at? How many voters do you need to contact? Things of that sort.
So this race in 2018 had about 160,000 votes in it. We anticipate that in 2020, with it being a presidential election year, that there'll be about 210,000 votes. That puts my win number, assuming a pretty even distribution, at about 75,000 Hillsborough County voters will need to check Sarwark for county attorney. We are already well along in trying to accomplish that goal. We have 4x8 signs at major intersections all around the county. We have smaller signs all over. We have tens of thousands of rack cards and literature going out door to door with our canvassing teams around the county. We have other things coming that I don't want to say too much about on a public forum.
Yep.
Money is great, but right now what we really need is we need volunteers to go out and help us door knock, help us text, help us call. We need people to talk to their friends. We need them to write letters, whether it's the Union Leader or the Telegraph or one of the smaller papers, just saying, this is important. Criminal justice is important. This is a race that might escape your attention. You have an opportunity to have a serious upgrade in the quality of county attorney in this county, a serious upgrade to the level of skill of the elected county attorney. Because traditionally, and this is just a fact of elected offices, traditionally, it's the deputy county attorneys, the assistant county attorneys, that are the experienced criminal lawyers. And then the elected county attorney tends to not have as much experience. So the opportunity to have somebody elected as the head of the office who can also fill in or assist or mentor is something that doesn't come around all the time, but people aren't aware of the race. And so letters to the editor, talking to your neighbors, getting our message out there is going to be crucial to making sure that we all have a safer Hillsborough County.
Nick, good luck in the race. Good luck with whatever else is on your plate. Thank you again for joining. And again, we're right at 3.5 weeks.
One more thing.
Yep, go ahead.
Visit sarwarkforthepeople.com if you would like to donate or sign up to volunteer or get on the email list to find out where we're going to be having events around where you live in Hillsborough.
Yep, and I was actually going to, after the little spiel, ask you for the URL, but I'll do it one more time. We're about 3.5 weeks out from the election. Make sure that if you are planning to vote absentee and you've not already requested your absentee ballot, do that sooner rather than later. You can go to darrylwperry.com/vote, and you can actually download the absentee ballot application there, all of the info on how to fill it out, how to actually jump through the hoops if you're not registered to vote, or if you're planning to vote in person. Make sure that you stay safe, wear the mask, attempt to socially distance, although I realize once you get up to the check-in table, you can't really socially distance from the 80-year-olds that are sitting on the other side of the table. And it's because of those people that I'm encouraging people to vote absentee, because you can do that if you have concern about catching or spreading COVID-19. Again, darrylwperry.com/vote is where you can find that information. Nick, give your info one more time right here at the end of the show.
Sure. If you want to volunteer, sign up, or donate to the campaign, you can visit sarwarkforthepeople.com, or on Facebook. The Facebook page is also called Sarwark for the People. I hope everybody gets out there and votes for the best candidate for county attorney, because then I'll win. Thank you so much for having me on, Darryl, and good luck in your race.
Yep. Thank you very much, Nick. And again, make sure that you actually check out all of the candidates up and down the ballot, because there are a lot of races other than just president, governor, U.S. Senate, and U.S. House. There's also state rep, state Senate. We have this weird 5-headed lieutenant governor called the Executive Council in New Hampshire. And then, of course, county offices, sheriff, attorney, treasurer, register of deeds, register of probate that actually has no duties, but they still get $100 a year. And then most districts within the state will have a county commission. Some of them have 2 that are coming up. So check out the information. There's voter guides put out by the ACLU on, I know they've done one for all of the county attorney candidates. They also have the one for governor. And if you haven't watched it yet, look at the Civil Liberties in the Corner office that I did just a couple of days ago with the ACLU and the UNH School of Law. Again, darrylwperry.com is the website. I do the town halls every Thursday, with a special town hall Tuesday coming up on the 20th, where I will somehow insert myself into the New Hampshire Public Radio gubernatorial debate that I was not invited to, because the Libertarians didn't get 5% of the vote 2 years ago, which seems to be a really strange criteria, but that's what it is. But I will be inserting myself on a special town hall Tuesday. Have a good night. Don't forget to vote.